Okay, now I think we can start. It's fine. Okay, welcome to all of our colleagues. So I would like to start the two-day webinar on the crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh region. So, dear colleagues, welcome to this webinar. Violence has escalated since 27th of September. The ongoing large-scale military actions are a grave concern. They have already resulted in many military and civilian deaths and human suffering. On 28th of September, I issued a presidential statement and called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. I appealed to all parties to urgently return to the ceasefire and to de-escalate. On the 10th of October, a humanitarian ceasefire came into force, which I publicly welcomed. However, this truce has been short-lived. I'm particularly alarmed by the further civilian deaths and injuries, which are unacceptable under any circumstances. All sides must fully respect the terms of the agreed ceasefire and abide by their obligations under international humanitarian law. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict cannot be resolved through military means. A full ceasefire must lead to renewed negotiations and the dialogue without preconditions under the OSCE. Only this will lead to a sustainable solution. Of course, NATO does not play a direct role in the resolution of this conflict. However, Armenia and Azerbaijan are two valued partners of NATO and the Assembly. Furthermore, the alliance is deeply committed to the principles of good neighborly relations and the resolution of differences through peaceful means. We must therefore discuss the recent developments in and around Nagorno-Karabakh, and this is why I called today's webinar. Colleagues, I'm pleased to introduce you the two prominent experts with us today. Our first speaker is Lawrence Broers, who is an associate fellow in the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House. Mr. Broers is also the Caucasus program director at the peacebuilding organization Conciliation Resources. He's a renowned researcher of conflicts in the South Caucasus and a peacebuilding practitioner. He did his doctoral research at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. Welcome, Lawrence. Our second speaker will be Nona Mikelidze, head of the Eastern Europe and Eurasia program at the Istituto Affari Internazionali. Ms. Mikelidze focuses on conflict resolution in the regions of the South Caucasus and the Black and Caspian Sea, as well as on Russian foreign policy. She holds academic degrees from the Scuola Normale Superiore in Pisa, the Humboldt University in Berlin, and the Tbilisi State University. We have many participants today. I will therefore take three questions at a time. The heads of delegation of our partners from Armenia and Azerbaijan get the floor first for 5 minutes each. For my other colleagues, please be brief, under 3 minutes. We will display a timer at the end. I invite our partners from Armenia and Azerbaijan to leave us with some parting words at the end. Now, let us start with Ms. Broers. You have the floor. Please, Lawrence.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. In my comments, I'll begin just with a very brief discussion of what the situation is right now before going into some background drivers, military factors, regional factors, and what can be done in this very grave situation. So I just want to begin by emphasizing the humanitarian catastrophe that is unfolding in these days. The principal towns in Nagorno-Karabakh itself have sustained massive damage. There are upwards of 70,000 people who have been displaced, whether to Armenia or within Nagorno-Karabakh itself. The towns on the Azerbaijani side of the line of contact have also sustained prolonged and repeated bombardment and missile strikes. and there are hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijanis living along the line of contact who are in a very vulnerable situation. At least 70 civilians have been killed on both sides, and there is very extensive damage to civilian infrastructure, including electricity and communications networks. So we have a lot of very serious humanitarian concerns that are aggravating an already serious situation with the coronavirus pandemic. The new infection rates across the conflict divide have expanded dramatically in these 3 weeks of war. And this humanitarian crisis is also, of course, going to be compounded by the onset of winter. Basic food supplies, hot water, heating are already a problem in Nagorno-Karabakh. So, you know, so much of the international attention is focused on the geopolitics of this conflict, but there is a humanitarian crisis ongoing that demands not just expressions of concern, but action. So to take a step back and to discuss some of the long-term, mid-term and short-term drivers behind this new episode of war. The Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict is in its fourth decade. This new war is the latest in a cycle of large-scale escalations ongoing since 2014. This growing insecurity, I think, represents at bottom Azerbaijani frustration with the diplomatic process mediated by the OSCE, led by the Minsk Group. Although the Minsk Group was proactive in the late 1990s and early 2000s, its mediation has generally been hollowed out over recent years by both the disengagement from the process by the parties and a wider global decline in capacities for multilateral diplomacy. The last major push was driven by President Dmitry Medvedev in 2011, and that ended without success in a summit in the Russian city of Kazan. Since then, there's been a deteriorating generalized climate of insecurity along the line of contact, and that has simply denied any oxygen to a meaningful conversation about a political resolution to the conflict. In April 2016, there was a major escalation that killed more than 200 people. And after that, Armenia and Azerbaijan agreed to a number of measures to strengthen the ceasefire and to move to more substantive negotiations. None of these measures were implemented. In April 2018, Armenia witnessed a bloodless velvet revolution, bringing an opposition activist, Nikol Pashinyan, to power. And there were expectations of a reset in the peace process, especially due to the fact that, unlike his two predecessors, Nikol Pashinyan was not a native of Nagorno-Karabakh itself. Now, there was some progress. President Ilham Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan agreed in Dushanbe in September 2018 to reinstate a hotline across the line of contact and to cooperate on humanitarian issues. And last year, 2019, was actually the lowest on record in terms of ceasefire violations and casualties. However, the political context began to deteriorate in summer 2019 after an ill-advised speech by Nikol Pashinyan evoking the unity of Armenia and Karabakh, and a number of other developments in 2020, notably the green light given to a third road connecting Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh had an inflammatory effect, aggravating the situation, were received very badly in Azerbaijan. These tensions surfaced in July of this year with a significant escalation in the area of the international border between Armenia and Azerbaijan that killed 17 people. And there was an unprecedented public protest in Azerbaijan calling for military action against Armenia in the aftermath of that violence. Now, pledges of Turkish support to Azerbaijan were reiterated in the aftermath of that violence. There were intensive contacts between the defense officials of both states, and Turkish politicians openly voiced threats against Armenia. Now, the global conjuncture in September 2020 saw a world overrun by the pandemic and major powers distracted with issues such as the US elections, Brexit, and the protests in Belarus. And perhaps this was seen as an opportune moment for a military operation. So the military goal appeared to be to recapture significantly larger parts of the occupied territories, this band of territories surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh, than had been captured in April 2016 by Azerbaijani forces. It appears that the Azerbaijani operation succeeded in breaking through the line of contact and advancing particularly along the southern flank through the areas of Fizuli and Jebrail. These are lower-lying areas that are harder to defend. And Azerbaijani forces have also apparently recaptured some area in the northeast. The battlefield dynamic seems to take the form of a contest between Azerbaijani aerial attrition, making use of Turkish and Israeli drone technology in particular, and Armenian terrestrial control. At present, it seems, from what we can tell, that Azerbaijani forces have recaptured up to 3% of the total area that's under Armenian control. That's roughly 11,000 square kilometers in total, Nagorno-Karabakh and the surrounding occupied territories. And it certainly seems clear that there is a technical edge that Azerbaijan now possesses, and that has exposed outdated Armenian air defenses and exposed land deployments. So on the 10th of October, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov negotiated a humanitarian ceasefire. This was broken overnight, and intense fighting continued the next day and continues to this day. And significantly, some of this fighting is now beginning to take place on the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh proper, rather than just the occupied territory. So the military picture is still dominant and with uncertain results. So the regionalization of this conflict, the current war, I think, marks a significant moment in the history of the conflict by redefining it as a theater of contestation by regional powers, Russia and Turkey, rather than a theater where an international coalition seeks to mediate and resolve the conflict. Turkey's role is a key factor. As I've mentioned, moral support to Azerbaijan is not new, but there seems to be a much more active and explicit effort for Turkey to become actively involved, making this another regional conflict alongside those in the Middle East and North Africa, where Russia and Turkey are engaged. There is a lot of controversy surrounding the nature of Turkish assistance. There are a lot of reports regarding mercenaries coming from Syria that Ankara and Baku have denied. Less controversial is the use of Turkish drones. Turkish arms sales to Azerbaijan expanded rapidly in the aftermath of violence in July of this year. So this has the effect of transforming this into one of a spectrum of conflicts where Russia and Turkey are engaged. And many analysts believe that this is in fact the goal in Ankara, to secure a new deal with Russia that would see the two powers in effect cooperating to manage and deconflict this conflict theater along the lines of the Astana process initiated for the Syrian peace talks in December 2016. So this has generated a lot of speculation about what Russia's role is, what Russia's motives are, and what its red lines are. It's very striking that in 2016, Moscow was able to negotiate a ceasefire within 4 days, and that ceasefire held. That has not happened this time. There is a more conspirological line of thought that sees Russia playing a waiting game, perhaps wanting to punish Nikol Pashinyan as a velvet revolutionary, a more pro-Western oppositional activist who came to power through street protest. But I am not completely convinced by that argument. I think what we're actually seeing is a breakdown in Russia's previous policy of keeping a kind of equilibrium between Armenia and Azerbaijan, being a security guarantor to Armenia, selling weapons to both, and seeing itself as the leader informally of the Minsk group. So it's important to acknowledge that security guarantees, of course, extend only to the territory of Armenia, not to Nagorno-Karabakh itself. And I'm also sure that if it can, Yerevan would prefer to manage this conflict without Russia's assistance. There's a lot of speculation about whether Russia wants to deploy peacekeepers on the ground, thereby inserting itself on a permanent basis as it did in other Eurasian conflicts of the early 1990s. So although I would argue that this has never been a proxy conflict, this new constellation of roles between Russia and Turkey has the prospect, or presents the prospect, that this could become more of a proxy conflict and suggests the possibility for geopolitical deal-making that would be profoundly top-down in nature. And colleagues in Armenian and Azerbaijani civil society are very concerned that this would result in a top-down conflict management process with little interest or capacity in dealing with the local concerns and identities that lie at the heart of the conflict. So I'll turn now to what potentially can be done in this situation. There are no optimal outcomes at this stage. The least worst outcome is a revival of multilateral diplomacy and the re-embedding of this conflict within a revitalized OSCE-led process. This outcome would rely on the capacities of Russia and Euro-Atlantic actors to set aside their differences on a whole range of other issues in order to work together to contain this conflict. Now, the UN Security Council has already reaffirmed the primary role of the OSCE as the mediator in this conflict, but there are gaps in OSCE capacities that would need to be plugged. This is specifically the case with regard to peacekeeping and the deployment of military observers. There are two, perhaps, key agendas that any revitalized process needs to address, and the lack of progress on these agendas over the last 6-7 years is what has brought us to where we are today. The first is security. The OSCE's ceasefire monitoring infrastructure is hopelessly out of date. It dates from the mid-1990s. We have only the special representative of the chair in office, Andrei Kasperchik, with 5 field assistants making pre-announced visits to the line of contact. And these have obviously not happened since March because of coronavirus. So the absence of any incident investigating mechanism and the absence of any commitment to a broader security offer has entrenched the security dilemma between the parties and facilitated escalation. So what we need, I think, are implementation of the agreements reached in May 2016 for mechanisms, new mandates to monitor ceasefire violations, and a much more public and sustained elaboration as to the scope and source of a potential peacekeeping operation to make this possibility seem more serious and plausible. We will also need international investigation of the alleged use of prohibited weaponry. Cluster munitions have been documented over the last few days, and civilian casualties that are still ongoing as of today. Next to security, we need movement on the political resolution and a shift to substantive talks. There have been no meaningful talks on the political issues for more than a year. And what this would imply is a revival of the discussion of the basic principles. This is the proposal that's been on the table since 2007. And the subject of talks since then. The basic principles is a document, 2 sides of A4 with a number of bullet points. These envisage, among other things, the withdrawal of Armenian forces from the occupied territories around Nagorno-Karabakh, a peacekeeping operation, a right of return for all displaced communities, a corridor linking Armenia and Karabakh, an interim status for Nagorno-Karabakh pending a final vote on its status. Now, there has been very little public advocacy of these principles since they were first made public, and yet none of the parties has explicitly rejected them. However, the outcomes of this conflict, I think, are potentially very dramatic in terms of shaping the context for a discussion of the basic principles. If Azerbaijan succeeds in recovering substantial territories, it may have fewer incentives for the trade-offs that the basic principles imply. And after a large-scale offensive against Nagorno-Karabakh, I think it's very likely that Armenians will not see interim status as a sufficient guarantee of their safety. And they will likely campaign for remedial secession, evoking the experience of Kosovo. So I think we cannot underestimate the difficulties of the political discussions ahead, but I think it's paramount that we have a transformation in the security context in order to facilitate and make possible those political discussions and urgent action to address the humanitarian crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Mikhalidze. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. It's difficult to add something what already have been said. Especially I will not go through the dimension of humanitarian catastrophe that is unfolding now in the region, and will not give the background story of the conflict that Lawrence told us already. Let me start with why the outbreak of the hostilities now, and maybe I will repeat something what I have already said, but I try to put it in different perspective. As we all know, we have to deal with a conflict which was used to define as frozen. However, the current escalation demonstrates how inadequate has been this assumption. Also because in absence of the international peacekeepers, the military escalation has always been frequent. So why now? And there are several reasons for this. From Azerbaijani perspective, it's because of mounting frustration, not only for the war they lost 30 years ago, but also for number of refugees and IDPs they have, and because also for some unfortunate statements of Premier Pashinyan. Lawrence already mentioned that back in 2018 there were some hopes for new reset in these peace talks, but there have been some statements like Karabakh is Armenia, or the initiative of President of de facto Nagorno-Karabakh to move the parliament from Stepanakert to Shusha. Of course, all of these statements kind of put an end to the patience of Baku to go on with the negotiations. More generally, over the years, both Armenia and Azerbaijan have remained firm in their position to demand the maximum and to consider Nagorno-Karabakh a kind of sacked territory. Now, to this, of course, we should add the complete absolute failure of the OSCE Minsk group mediation with its three co-chairs, mediating the negotiations, Russia, France, and US, because of different reasons, because of lack of political willingness from the parties or lack of instruments and leverage to coerce the conflict parties into making concessions. Now, why now? It's because, and Lawrence mentioned it, the US distracted by upcoming presidential elections, Europe struggling with pandemic, Russia having its own problems now with pandemic, with Belarus, with Ukraine, Navalny case, and there was, of course, this lack of international attention to the region, and Azerbaijan definitely considered it was the right moment to regain the territories back. Also because it was not in Armenia's interest. Now, to be honest, it was not in Armenia's interest to start the war because Armenia won the one a long time ago, and the interest of Armenia was, if not kind of resolve the conflict, at least to normalize the status quo. So Baku, of course, seemed to be encouraged also by Turkey's positioning. Turkey has long voiced support for Azerbaijan, but has never taken kind of direct part in fighting. And today there are reports, if not confirmed, of Turkish no, this is confirmed, the use of Turkish drones by Baku, or about the Syrian mercenaries kind of fighting alongside Azeris. During these days of war, there have been actually two things about the involvement of external actors in this conflict. One, considering that Turkey's involvement in this escalation is somehow a game changer, and that Russia has remained kind of surprised by this assertiveness of President Erdogan. This was also why it delayed its response. And others thinking, arguing that actually Russia still controls the situation, and it will be up to the Kremlin to decide when and under which condition to stop the escalation. So here is where we slightly differ from Lawrence. My feeling is he belongs to the first group, and I belong to the second one. Russia indeed appeared willing to allow Azerbaijan to recapture some areas of out of the 7 adjacent region occupied by Armenia. In its rhetoric, the Kremlin seemed to be less critical towards Azerbaijan and Turkey, while reminding to Armenia that it was not possible to activate CSTO obligations under which Russia has to defend Armenia in case of external aggression, as according to Moscow, Azerbaijan was conducting the war within the territories considered as Azerbaijani's by the international law. So why Russia seemed to be less supportive towards Armenia? Because its activity has been locally limited to phone contacts with the parties directly involved, especially Ankara. There are, I think, the several reasons for this. And the reasons are the following. I mean, Armenia is a strategic partner for Russia. Armenia is keeping a hosting military bases in Gyumri. Armenia is a member of Collective Security Treaty Organization and is member of Russia-led Eurasian Economic Union. Well, however, I think that the bilateral relations between Russia and Armenia have changed since 2008, and namely after the revolution which brought current Prime Minister Pashinyan to power. In eyes of President Putin, Pashinyan has an original sin, that of being one who came to power through manifestations and through revolutions. We all know how averse Putin is towards all kinds of revolution, be it Arab Spring or be it the color revolutions in the post-Soviet space. Thus, Pashinyan's positioning himself as a democratic leader who continuously reminds us how autocratic is Aliyev or Erdogan, this constant underlying of democratic governance vis-a-vis autocratic rule is something that irritates the Kremlin. So, second, Pashinyan tried to move cautiously to the European Union. So, and this was not appreciated by Russia. It was not appreciated, the arrest of President Kocharyan, for example. Now, on the other hand, we have Russia's bilateral relations with Azerbaijan that are just perfect. Over the years, bilateral relations have been developed in particular in military sector. And now here we speak about the Turkey's involvement in this war, about the Turkey selling arms to Armenia and to Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan using Turkish drones in fighting. According to CIPRI, Stockholm International Peace Institute, in the period of 2015-2019, a total of 60% of Azerbaijani arms imports came from Israel and 31% from Russia. Only 3% came from Turkey. Thus, Russia has helped to foil an arms race in the region, as it sold the arms also to Armenia of course, on discount prices, but still. Another factor why the relations between Azerbaijan and Russia are just perfect is that, unlike to Georgia, for example, Azerbaijan has not been an enemy state for Russia. Baku managed to maintain a multi-vector policy, also thanks to its energy resources, but also avoided any kind of anti-Russian rhetoric in policy making. So Azerbaijan openly declared it does not want to achieve kind of membership in the Euro-Atlantic institutions. Moreover, the Russian political establishment has close ties with the Azerbaijan political elite, and President Putin enjoys the style of governance of his counterpart, Aliyev. So, as one of the Russian experts put it, Russia may have reasons to help Armenia, but it has no reason to punish Azerbaijan. Thus, Russia considers Armenia as a strategic partner, but values its relations with Azerbaijan as well. So having a military economic cooperation with both countries, Moscow has always tried to ensure a balance of forces, preventing any side to achieve superiority and to unfreeze the conflict. Thus, maintaining a status quo and not resolving the conflict has been in Russia's interest over these years. So I would not exclude that Russia will permit to Azerbaijan to advance further with the military escalation, maybe to retake some other territories out of 5 regions, and then Kremlin will intervene, possibly also with the proposal to establish Russian peacekeeper mechanism on the ground. As Russia's reaction to the Turkish involvement, Moscow is unlikely to accept a permanent Turkish military presence in the region unless it will somehow coordinate it with the Kremlin. Moreover, the reported presence of Syrian mercenaries also acts as a kind of potential red flag in view of Moscow's sensitiveness in the nearby of North Caucasus. And Mr. Narishkin, the head of the secret services, already made a statement about this, how Russia is worried about the participation of Syrian mercenaries in this fighting. But I would exclude any kind of clash between Erdogan and Putin, also because what Ankara and Moscow managed to do is to capitalize on their parallel interests, be it in Libya or Syria, and pay down differences and divisions so that this did not lead to direct conflict between two. There are important trade, energy, and economic relations between Russia and Turkey, and they both, I think, are very conscious of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both of you. It was a really interesting and informative analysis from your side. So now I would like to ask first head of the delegation of the Azeri delegation, Mr. Ziyafat Asgarov, to use the 5 minutes and tell their point of view and opinion about this conflict and this situation. And then, of course, I will ask our Armenian colleague, Andranik Kocharian, to tell us their point of view about this. Ziyafat, the floor is yours, please.
We don't hear.
Is coming through. No sound from the speaker is coming through. Can you hear me now? Chair, thank you very much for the organization of this webinar. On behalf of my delegation, I would like to express our gratitude and as well to your colleagues as well. Before we speak about our point of view on this situation, I would like to say something with regards to the title of your seminar. I believe that it is incorrect because the term cry relating to the Nagorno-Karabakh, it is not an abstract territory. It's not an abstract thing. It is a territory that has been recognized by the international laws belonging to the Azerbaijani Republic. We have asked you many times to title this webinar on the crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh and the adjacent regions in the Azerbaijani Republic. This is what I wanted to say about the title of the seminar. With regards to the opinions of our most esteemed experts, I wanted to mention to you that Azerbaijan never seized anything. Azerbaijan is liberating its own land from Armenian occupation. And Ms. Nona Mikhailidze and Mr. Lawrence Bobros was always saying that Moscow allowed it to seize territories. Nor Moscow nor other party can allow us or tell us to do something. We are resolving our own issues. We are liberating our lands from the occupiers, from the aggressors. With regards to the events that took place on the 27th of September. The 27th of September, once again, Armenia provoked a military offensive. And we were forced to react, to respond with an offensive on our part. Prior to that, there had been provocations in 2016, as Mr. Lawrence Bors mentioned, but also in July, on the 12th of July in the Kolos region, and also in August, a diversionary team wanted to cross the state border, and now the most recent event is on the 27th of September. So in the course of the last 10 days, what have we received from the Armenian side? I will report now. The number of killed civilians, 44 persons. Wounded civilians, 218 persons. Number of homes that have undeemed to be lived in, 1,592. Number of high-rises, residential buildings destroyed, 79. Number of civilian facilities that have been destroyed, 290. And I wanted to touch upon the events that took place in the Ganja area. Ganja, the city of Ganja, is the second largest city in Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, Armenia has made Scud missile strikes, although they were made in Russian and called Ilbrus in Russian. It hit a civilian facility, and as a result of this, 10 civilians were killed and more than 35 were wounded. This is the true face of Armenia. On the 9th and the 10th of October, ministers of foreign affairs of Azerbaijan and Armenia came to Moscow on Moscow's invitation, and they signed a declaration consisting of 4 articles. This a declaration that was adopted. The parties agreed that there will be a ceasefire as of 1200 hours of the 19th of October 2020 for humanitarian reasons, in order to exchange the bodies of the casualties with the help of the International Red Cross. The Azerbaijani Republic and the Republic of Armenia, with the mediation of the Minsk OSCE group, on the basis of the most fundamental Madrid principles, agreed to proceed to substantial negotiations in order to achieve a peaceful resolution. And the parties confirmed that this negotiation is needed and the format is appropriate. This conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia has been going on for 30 years. In 1993, 4 resolutions were adopted by the UN, by the Permanent Security Council, and our most esteemed experts did not talk about that. This resolution 8222, 5374 and 84, 4 resolutions which talk very clearly that Armenian forces that Armenia should remove its forces from the occupied territories, which was never done. With regards to the involvement of Turkey, we buy weapons from many countries, such as Belarus, Israel, and Turkey as well. Turkey, in this particular case, only is helping us in the area of political area and economic area. It is not helping us with weapons. And you should know this. Everything else is a lie, an Armenian propaganda that is being spread by Armenia.
Next, you touched upon an issue of mercenaries. You mentioned mercenaries. Mr. Lawrence mentioned that there's some mercenaries moved from Syria to Azerbaijan. Again, we negate it. We and do it again. So, by the way, President of France, Mr. Macron, in his conversation with Mr. Aliyev, touched upon that issue too. Unfortunately, no evidence were provided, and Aliyev asked him to provide any evidence. What are the mercenaries? Which way they've been transferred? No, not a single evidence. And you're talking about mercenaries, so to speak, mercenaries transferred from Syria. On the contrary, we do have evidence that terrorists from PKK are being transferred to Armenia from Lebanon, from Syria, and other countries. That has been proved already. We do have evidence, and we have provided to the international authorities, to international agencies. I would like this to be taken into consideration. As far as the solution of the issue is concerned, of the problem, the way it was written in Madrid Basic Principles, adopted both by Armenia and Azerbaijan, the issue should be resolved in the following way. Armenian forces leave the occupied territories, first thing. Secondly, those DSPs, displaced persons, should return to their native lands. This is naturally, we understand that it could only be done gradually, step by step, and only then we can do negotiations about the future status of Nagorno-Karabakh. Well, Mr. Lawrence was saying that the Azerbaijanians captured some villages. We didn't capture them, Mr. Expert. We are liberating our territories. Do you understand me or not? I would like, please understand it in a correct way. We as Azerbaijan, joined the United Nations together with the Nagorno-Karabakh. Nagorno-Karabakh is considered to be part of the sovereign republic, and you shouldn't manipulate with all these matters. Once again, we declare that we stick to this stick to this humanitarian ceasefire. In Moscow, we agreed on ceasefire, but unfortunately, the ceasefire, we wanted to cease the fire, but on October the 11th, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia flies to Moscow, and as soon as he lands, he declares something different. That is, Nagorno-Karabakh should decide its own fate, and we should join this peaceful process of Nagorno-Karabakh. There is no Nagorno-Karabakh. It's a legal formation, Nagorno-Karabakh. It's an illegal formation, dear experts. That's why we see the solution of the issue only in one possible way: to move the Armenian forces from our occupied territories. There's a war on my territory, in my country, on the territory of my state. Dear experts, I'm asking you, have you ever wondered why a member of Minsk group of OSCE, there are 11 of them, this is the list of Minsk group members, not a single time, they haven't got together at the presidential levels of those countries, neither at the level of prime ministers, not even the participation of Minister for Foreign Affairs. They never got together jointly. While we demanded, we requested that, dear colleagues, let's sit and resolve this issue. There will be bad end, and this is what we're having now. By the way, the co-chairmen of the of Minsk Group, for 30 years, these co-chairs, they visit Yerevan, Baku, but where's the result? What you're dealing with there? What's the product, dear colleagues? Thank you very much. I would like to draw a conclusion. Once again, in conclusion, concluding my emotions, I want to bring this to our colleagues in Armenia. Still, until now, we're sticking to the humanitarian ceasefire and will continue doing so. But in order to once and forever stop this conflict, resolve this conflict, what is needed is the occupied territories need to be liberated, freed. Thank you.
Colleague, Mr. Kocharian, and of course you have the same seconds than your colleague from Azerbaijan. So the floor is yours, and then of course I will give back the floor to our experts to give some feedback and reactions what have said by the two heads of delegations. So now, Mr. Kocharian, Andranik, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Distinguished President of the NATO, dear colleagues, the active and direct involvement of NATO in the actions published by Azerbaijan on Artsakh on September 27, undeniable from the very first days of the war. We heard many statements from the Turkish military political leadership of Azerbaijan. And as for the stockpile of weapons and military equipment, Turkey not only provides huge amounts of aid, but also actively sponsors terrorism in the world. It is already undeniable that with the mediation of Turkey and financial support, Azerbaijan is using Syrian mercenaries on the battlefield. In fact, Armenia is waging not only a local, but also an international anti-terrorist strategy. The events taking place in Artsakh have turned into a major threat to international security. The sobering calls and harsh statements of the international community not only do not affect Turkey and Azerbaijan in any way, but on country, but even after the declared humanitarian ceasefire, violating all the international norms, they continue to target the civilian population and civilian infrastructure, which is a war crime. Moreover, we expect that the actions of the countries that continue to support crimes against humanity with weapons will be condemned by the international community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give back the floor to our experts. If you would like to add or answer or give some feedbacks to us, then please. Perhaps now, Nona, if it's fine for you, let's start with you. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's difficult to comment also because they are official representatives of the conflict party, so we expect them to speak in this way. So it will be not my aim now to enter into discussion with them. I can give credit to Azerbaijani representative in saying that the mediation of the OSCE Minsk group has been unsuccessful in these years, and indeed in 26 years, if you cannot manage to achieve some kind of results, you have to question about yourself. And I think it's time has been come to kind of rethink about this mediation forum, maybe changing also the co-chairs. Maybe time has come for the EU to be more proactive in this conflict. We know that you somehow tried also, where there was a Peter Semneby in the Caucasus to play a major role in the framework of the OSCE, but then it was the idea was rejected by the conflict parties. But yes, thinking about the co-chairs, we know, for example, that the position of France has been considered somehow biased in this conflict. So I think there should be kind of new ideas about changing the format, that maybe the EU could be represented in face of the number of member states and not only of France. Otherwise, I have nothing to add what we have already heard.
Thank you very much. And now, Lawrence.
I would like to thank Mr. Asgarov and Mr. Kocharyan for their comments. That's much appreciated. Just a few points of clarification. Perhaps it's a linguistic issue in the translation, but I do not refer to Azerbaijani territorial gains as seizing territory. I use the word to recapture or return those territories. And in some of my written works, I explicitly say that from Baku's perspective, this is liberating territory. I've also criticized the use of the term liberated territories for the occupied territories around Nagorno-Karabakh in Armenian discourse. So I just want to make that clear. Thank you, Mr. Asgarov, for highlighting the need for increased OSCE mediation. In fact, since 2016, I and other experts have been advocating for the Minsk conference to finally be called. So the Minsk group co-chairs all these years. Their mandate is to prepare for a Minsk conference that was originally supposed to take place in the early 90s and never took place. So I think a Minsk conference could be a venue at which all of these issues could be discussed more openly. I don't know that Minsk would now be the most appropriate venue for such a conference, but in some of my written comments, I've suggested that it could take place in Stockholm because Sweden assumes the chair in office of the OSCE in 2021. Moreover, Sweden, along with Finland, are also in the wider Minsk group and have experience as former co-chair nations. So in that sense, I think our positions are not that far apart. I also want to say that I think it's very easy to blame the mediators when there is such a terrible outbreak of violence. Of course, one wants to ascribe responsibility for that. But France, Russia, and the United States, the Minsk group mechanism is a mediation mechanism. It's not an arbitration mechanism. It requires the parties to the conflict to assume responsibility and to devise their own peace strategies and to engage in meaningful dialogue. There hasn't been that commitment from the parties over the last decade. I would see the situation as being very different. Each side has had its alternative strategy. For Armenia, that has been to allow the indefinite postponement of a solution, allowing the embedding of Armenian control over Nagorno-Karabakh and its incorporation into a single Armenian space, culturally, politically, and in terms of security. For Azerbaijan, the strategy has been to build up defense capacity and to destabilize a ceasefire that it sees as unjust. And neither side in that sense has really invested in a meaningful peace strategy. And regarding the roles of outside powers, I would say that, you know, one of my basic principles is, as far as possible, to defend and to prioritize the sovereignty of Armenia and Azerbaijan. This conflict compromises their sovereignty in so many ways. That's been particularly obvious, I think, in the case of Armenia, when we look at the failed negotiation of an association agreement with the European Union, for example. Azerbaijan has had more structural autonomy because of its oil and gas revenues. But ultimately, this conflict has limited the choices that both countries have. And the emergence of a proxy dynamic with outside powers seeking influence is a threat to the sovereignty of both states and their capacity ultimately to decide for themselves how this conflict should be resolved. So I just want to recall a comment that somebody once made at a dialogue meeting that I was chairing. If Armenians and Azerbaijanis don't sort this out for themselves, somebody else will. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to our Italian colleague, Mr. Orsini. Ruxanda, if you could bring him up to the... And then we have...
E poi, collega Turco.
Yeah.
Quindi abbiamo due colleghi italiani. Quindi abbiamo...
Disappeared. There seems to be an issue there, so maybe we can take the next speaker. Mr. President, let me see.
Okay, so we have Mr. Fomentini.
Good evening. I speak it.
Buonasera, parlerò in italiano. With Orsini, Cangini and Bianchi, we've been outside the Chamber of Deputies in Italy to bring our solidarity to the Armenian community in Italy. I'm starting thus to be very clear about our thoughts with regard to the identity and values and history. We Italian members of Parliament believe that the first Christian state in history, Armenia, because of shared values and ideals and its importance in the history of Christianity, deserves attention on our part. Armenia also suffered a genocide which our Parliament 2 years ago formally recognized. Our fear is that the presence of the Armenian people will continue to be wiped out in Nagorno-Karabakh too. I heard in statements that for 30 years there is an Armenian occupation in Nagorno-Karabakh. In our opinion, there hasn't been a 30-year occupation, but there's a historical presence of the Armenian people in that area, and this should not be erased. It should not be the victim of genocide. It should be recognized and protected by the international community. We should establish a ceasefire rapidly, and as NATO members, we have to make a choice of values and of a field. We have to choose democracy, freedom, and Western values. So how can the Syrian jihadists be compatible with these values, or cluster bombs? This is what we ask ourselves, and we are aligned with NATO, who asked Turkey to put an end to hostilities. We know that Turkey can do this, and we hope that it will.
Thank you very much. And now our Canadian colleague, if I'm right, Ruxandra.
So we have accepted him. There seems to be a delay as well. Let's see. He has appeared on screen. Yeah, Mr. El-Khoury. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, dear delegate. Nice to be with you. First of all, my thought and the prayer goes to the fallen civilian life in this barbarian conflict. And also, I echo the Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada, and I thank the government of Canada for its decision to stop selling sensitive instrument to Turkey, because it was confirmed to Canada that Turkey is sending them to Azerbaijan and flaring the fight more, instead of playing a role to narrow the gap between the two countries and working hard for a peaceful solution. So the Azerbaijani full-scale offensive of the entire line of contact between the armed forces of Azerbaijan and Artsakh Nagorno-Karabakh quickly developed into the heaviest fighting since the ceasefire was established in 1994. The ongoing hostilities are way more intense than the previous ceasefire violation and even the 4-day war unleashed by Azerbaijan in 2016. The situation is further destabilized by the political and military assistance rendered to Azerbaijan by its ally Turkey, which is not only supplying Azerbaijan by providing lethal weaponry, but has military instructors and experts and the special force unit on the ground. And here I would like to bring your attention that the behavior of Turkey as member of NATO, they are trying to intervene in Syria, in Libya, in Lebanon, in Iraq, bad relations Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, with Cyprus, with Greece, with even France. And I don't understand how can NATO allow such a member to have this problem with those countries. So the president of Azerbaijan himself is not hiding the deployment of Turkish F-16 fighters jets in Azerbaijan. As if this is not enough, numerous reports are emerging on Turkey's recruitment of mercenaries and terrorist fighters from Middle East and further transportation to Azerbaijan to fight against Armenia. And here I would like to bring your attention. Imagine the feeling of the Armenians when they feel and see that Turkey, who committed genocide 100 years ago about Armenia, and it was recognized internationally, and seeing this country again working, encouraging an ethnic cleansing in that area. It's a human feeling and no one could forget it at all. The Azerbaijani army, also backed by Turkey, unconditional support and with the help of terrorist fighters, is committing flagrant violation of principle of international humanitarian and customary law, war crime against the peaceful civilian population of Nagorno-Karabakh by deliberately bombing and shelling churches, hospitals, schools, and civilian infrastructure. Turkish leadership is directly undermining the international community's effort to establish a ceasefire, openly denouncing the peace process on behalf of the leadership of Azerbaijan and restoring to war for a solution of the conflict, while the international community, including our beautiful country, Canada, OSCE, Minsk Group co-chair countries, are welcoming the decision on cessation of hostility for a humanitarian purpose. Turkey supports the continuation of hostility until Azerbaijan gains full control of the region. Imagine such behavior. After Turkish invasion, I would like by concluding in saying that NATO should have a strict rule against any other member. And if Azerbaijan look for a peace, I believe NATO and the family of nations represented by United Nations must put observers on the ground to see who is violating the ceasefire or sending peacekeeping forces in order to establish a peace and let civilians live in a peace and enjoy their humanitarian life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And now we have a Turkish colleague, if I'm right, Fikri. The floor is yours.
Colleagues, good afternoon, Mr. President, and all my colleagues and all the participants. First of all, I'm really very surprised and I couldn't understand what we are talking about. We are talking about a problem that 30 years occupation of Azerbaijan territories. Really, many resolutions of United Nations underlined that Armenia occupied Azerbaijan territory. So the fair behavior is to support withdrawal of the occupational territory of the Azerbaijan by Armenia. So we are talking about what? We are talking about ceasefire. Okay, we are support ceasefire as Turkey, but how can we manage most probable next conflicts? Because the core of the problem is really here on the table. If we couldn't solve the problem, the core of the problem, how can we really get more and more steps in this problem? This is really, Turkish position is very clear. Turkey is demanding all the occupational Azerbaijan territory must be liberated and all the Armenian forces must withdraw from the occupied territories of Azerbaijan. the solution is this. Another solution will not be really sustainable. We know, but this is not the beneficial or favor of Azerbaijan people. This is also favor and beneficial for Armenian people, not Armenian administrators. I know Armenian politicians may not accept, but today Armenian people are in very deep poverty because of the conflicts. They deserve really wealth. They deserve social welfare. If the conflicts would be in a solution, really the most beneficent of the solution is really the Armenian people, because we have enough problems. Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict is a very big threat for the Caucasus. You know the aims of Russia. Georgia's position, you know. If Armenia withdraw from the Azerbaijan territories, and this region will be a peaceful region, and this peaceful region will get more and more economic welfare, and the most beneficent of the economic welfare is really the Armenian people. Do you know, more than 100,000 Armenian people are working in Turkey in order to sustain their family living in Armenia. Why don't we think the aspect of this humanitarian side? It is easier to say, okay, get a ceasefire, but it is hard to say there are many UN resolutions that underlines the occupation of Armenian forces to the Azerbaijan territory, withdraw all the Azerbaijan territories, and then get a very peaceful regional position. And Turkish position is very clear. Yes, Azerbaijan is the righteous party of this conflict, and Turkey supports Azerbaijan in this conflict. It is very clear, but it is not clear. It is very big denial to bring Syrian mercenaries to the Azerbaijan. It is not correct. Turkey supports politically Azerbaijan because Azerbaijan is a right position for this conflict. If we contribute as NATO to this conflict, we have to underline all the UN resolutions, and we have to really encourage both sides to obey the resolutions, all the implementation of the resolutions. If we ignore I'm finishing, but if you ignore all the resolutions and say that Armenian or Christian, the first state is not to contribute to the solution. The contribution of the solution as NATO is to encourage Armenia to withdraw the territorial Azerbaijan territory and to get a wealth region for the Armenian and Azerbaijan and Georgian people for the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fikri. And now we are waiting for your answers from our colleagues. So please, who would like to start? Lawrence or Nona? Okay, Lawrence then. Please, the floor is yours.
I'm not sure that I have kind of specific answers. Obviously, we've heard very polarized narratives about what's going on. so yes, I mean, I think, yeah, it is really difficult to respond. I mean, what I would say is that what we're seeing and what I'm very much afraid of is that we will see more ethnic cleansing in the coming days and potentially weeks. This is the significance of fighting, reaching the former autonomous region in Nagorno-Karabakh. And it's worth being reminded that military advances by either side in the war in the 1990s was always accompanied by the complete ethnic cleansing of the representatives of the other nationality. So that legacy has never been addressed. Both parties, both nationalities suffered grievously from this in the early 1990s. In terms of numbers, it is the Azerbaijani side that suffered more. As I mentioned, some 600,000 internally displaced Azerbaijanis from Nagorno-Karabakh itself and from the surrounding territories. So this is the legacy that we're dealing with, and this is what's driving fears. And if there would now be more ethnic cleansing, I think that will really transform this conflict, take it to a new level of escalation, and it will transform the prism through which external observers can assess the claims of the parties. I want to, again, draw attention to the civilian deaths. There have been more civilian deaths reported today in Terter on the Azerbaijani side. I also want to draw your attention to a reported atrocity in Hadrut. 4 civilians were apparently discovered. They were not evacuated in time. They were discovered by Azerbaijani units and reportedly killed. And this is driving fear now of renewed ethnic cleansing, and it really is the responsibility of the parties to hold back from that and to avoid that escalatory dynamic. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. And of course, now Nona has the possibility to answer, or you can say just to skip. So no problem with that. If you would like to say that you don't have to add anything, that's no problem with that. No obligation. Just I would like to give the possibility for you if you would like to give a feedback or anything like that. So Nona, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Then very briefly, indeed we see how much the views are polarized. What I regret always is to bring somehow the aspect of religion in this conflict, because it really doesn't matter. So I heard the Italian colleague, and this portraying this conflict like the Christianity with the Muslim society, also because Azerbaijan has been always a secular country, and with a huge number of atheists, by the way, which is a kind of exception in the post-Soviet space, where we have this explosion of believers, especially since the collapse of the Soviet Union. So let's not describe, we have already enough problems around this conflict. Let's not put into it also this religious dimension and describe it as a conflict between civilizations. After 30 years of the conflict, where we had the new generations who maybe didn't saw the conflict, there were some hopes or more hopes for confidence building. Now, bearing in mind what is happening on the ground, of course, we are far away from this objective to reach this confidence building. So I think it is very much important also to pay attention on the rhetoric. On the rhetoric, I mean the conflict parties, but also the external actors. Armenia also positioning himself is so much hostile towards Turkey, and I understand all the historical roots and historical reasons for it, but it's something that I think contributes to kind of increase Armenia's dependence on Russia and Armenia's dependence on Nagorno-Karabakh conflict resolution, because we all remember how much Armenia has to give up in order to kind of save its position over Nagorno-Karabakh. We all remember how Armenia renounced to sign association agreements and deep and comprehensive free trade agreements in 2013 with the EU because of Nagorno-Karabakh and because of its dependence on Russia. So I very much regret that we are witnessing this humanitarian catastrophe. After all, I'm originally Georgian. It's my region, and I regret that the hopes now to build kind of confidence within conflict parties, but between the ordinary people, are so far away now, and we are so far away from this objective. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now our colleague from the European Parliament, Anna, please, the floor is yours. Ruxandra can help me with this. And
Mrs. Bonfrisco, so we've given you the floor. You should now be able to activate your camera and microphone. Okay. She's disappeared. Now let's try again. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now? Yes. It's okay.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, the panelists, for their analysis. And thank you, the Secretariat, because I know that Italian interpretation has been provided today. I want to say a few words in English first. Then I will switch to Italian.
Mrs. Bonfrisco, I'm afraid that your sound is,
must have a more active, unified, and effective role in the prevention of any future conflicts in the neighborhood. In this regard, the current escalation in the Eastern Mediterranean and South Caucasus, ignited or amplified by Turkey intervention, required to redefine urgently an overall strategy with Turkey, both organizations. Let me be honest. I really do not have any concept or even principle in combating terrorism and jihadism from Syria to combat. This is simply unacceptable and immoral to the Western world. Now I switch to Italian because I want to be very, very clear. Dobbiamo ribadire, e spero possa sentire, dobbiamo ribadire inaccettabile qualsiasi.
Let me repeat in Italian. Hopefully I'll be able to hear. We should avoid involvement in this region. We should underscore the role of the co-presidents and the Minsk group in trying to determine a peaceful resolution for self-determination, territorial integrity, and the non-use of force. It must be clear that there is no military solution for the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. The trilateral agreements of 1994 and 1995 on the establishment and consolidation of the ceasefire regime in the region are not time-limited. And these should be rigorously enforced. And I also firmly denounce and condemn the use of cluster bombs and civilian infrastructure and any violations of the humanitarian ceasefire. by Azerbaijan. We've got to be serious and honest, and we've got to consider the only option we have in order to acknowledge and recognize the right of these people to self-determination and to make sure that the international community recognizes the history and the rights of the Armenian people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to Deki. Lune, if Ruxandra can help me. Does it work?
Yeah, Udeki, you should be here. Yeah.
Yes, I hope you're here. Thank you very much. And thank you for this very interesting discussion. And I want to reinforce what my colleague just before said, that military solutions are no solutions at all. I come from the country where we have both Armenian and Azeri communities living next to each other peacefully. And that's also why it saddens me deeply to see the humanitarian suffering brought upon usage of weapons to find a solution to a crisis that can't be resolved this way. Military involvement in this contested territory will just bring more bitterness. It will just bring more feelings, anger that could explode in whatever time in future. This is why I think it's paramount that all the parties return to negotiation tables and actually respect this ceasefire. What we have seen, the relative good effect of the recent discussions in Moscow is very hopeful. Also to hear that both of our Armenian and Azeri colleagues are actually interested to give people in the contested area the possibility to return to their homes, to live peacefully, to have prosperity. So if there is just a question of mediation, I'm sure we find easily a good mediation. But important part here is to accept that this conflict can only be found a solution at the table with all parties present and wishing to really start thinking of the people who live there. It's about their homes. So thank you very much for this discussion, and I hope we can continue on not so much asking who is responsible to what, but to ask what is the next step to return to a more peaceful arrangement in the zone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Ivans. Clemente.
Okay. Hello, everybody. During the working in Parliament, I was 8 years a chairman for interparliamentary friendship group with the Armenian Parliament. I was many times, I was in Armenia, I was many times also in Azerbaijan. And I know the problems. It always was on the top in the all discussion. But the history beginning maybe 100 years ago when some countries wasn't on the map in the world. But the Stalin mixed the people, the nations from one land to another land to change. And until 100 years, the people, the nations cannot return back on their own land. This is the fact. And this conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, or now we can say the war, what happened, it's going to 30 years. But working Minsk group, working Madrid groups, it's looking for all the high meetings. and no results. How say Mr. Asgarov, no results. So chairman come and go away and no result. But excuse me, Mr. Asgarov, Mr. Kacharian, you are the chairman of the group of NATO Parliament Assembly. You often come to our assembly twice a year, except this year, and we have a good platform to talking about this and to speaking about this. We spent 5 years ago the role seminars in Armenia, where Azerbaijan people didn't come there. In our plan was also the meeting just this weekend in Armenia, also to meeting. Okay, it was cancelled, but perhaps it will be also. And the problems is that the people, the civilian people, each day die, one side, another side. And you are using the military equipment of 21st century. 20th century, that means it's very precise weapon. And better to sitting with one round table, maybe without Madrid's groups or Minsk group, if no solution with them, but just the parliament and begin to talk each with other and to find some solution, because the diplomacy working still and the parliamentarians also working, but better to talk, not to shoot each other. Thank you very much. I would like to kindly ask also the Turkish delegation to help both sides, not be in one side, but as a democratic country to help for the peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivans. And now Mr. Orsini, Andrea Orsini from Italy, if we can.
Collega Orsini, ha facoltà. Funziona? Okay, I'll be speaking in Italian. As many colleagues who've already taken the floor, I am considering the role of a great country in the Atlantic Alliance, Turkey. This is a great country which, of course, shares our values, the values of peace and tolerance and pluralism. So it is not a question of a religious belonging or religious beliefs. I have respect for all religious beliefs in these countries. What I'm wondering is whether a great country of the Atlantic Alliance like Turkey, which I respect fully and which has a role in the Caucasus region and in the Middle East and in the Eastern Mediterranean, I'm wondering, I was saying, whether Turkey can, in fact, be so aligned in a conflict where there are different sides. And of course, we can challenge the different positions. I believe that I mean, we're not here to say who's right and who's wrong, but the Armenians do believe that there is the right to self-determination of the people in Nagorno-Karabakh, and therefore they have the right to choose their own future. That said, I mean, we are here in a NATO meeting, so does it make sense to speak about the Atlantic Alliance? Well, I think that they can request a ceasefire, a negotiation. This is the role that I see, that I envisage, and I don't think that Turkey can refuse to be part of that and take one side as opposed to another, because otherwise other Atlantic Alliance countries can take the other side, and we certainly don't want to witness this kind of division. That would not be positive at all. We are seeing this war, and Armenia is not the aggressor. We've got to take this into account. So if this is a defense alliance which repudiates war, then it cannot be, the alliance cannot be indifferent to that situation. Thank you.
Give the floor to Berat Gonkar from Turkey. Berat, are you here with us?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you very much, Attila. I think it's very important and timely to talk about this conflict. However, first of all, I would like to just remind my colleagues here that Turkey is not acting on the side of Azerbaijan because it's Azerbaijan. In this case, as everybody knows, Azerbaijan is abiding by the international law. It is abiding by the United Nations resolutions, and they are trying to liberate their occupied territories from an aggressor nation. So that's why not only Turkey, but all of our NATO allies should be very firm on standing by and supporting the international law. If we do not do that, we cannot resolve any conflict. And the NATO alliance becomes really meaningless if we do not accept the international law. The United Nations Security Council had 4 very clear resolutions about the occupied territories, lands of Azerbaijan by Armenian aggression. So this is a fact, and this cannot be denied by anybody in the world. It is very clear. So the United Nations Charter also gives every nation the right to liberate their occupied lands. So this is also lawful action. So in this case, the support given to Azerbaijan should be understood as the support given to the righteous party, or to be fair and just in international relations. So here, the international community should condemn the aggressor, the occupier, with a single voice. And we should not ignore that. Unfortunately, the Armenia is attacking, targeting the civilian populations. Ganja, the second largest city, most populated city in Azerbaijan, is targeted by ballistic missiles by Armenia. So this is unacceptable. Everybody should be one voice in condemning this. So the solution to this conflict is to abide by international law, withdraw from the occupied territories of Azerbaijan, and make a solution on the table. A lot of things had been said about Turkey's involvement, but we are a NATO country, and we have a deep experience and knowledge on how to deal with international issues. Our political support is an exemplary support for all of our allies to be followed, because we are with the right values at this time. If you stay against these rightful values from any part of the world, from Italy or from Canada or from wherever, you will lose your credibility, and it will show that you don't have any real values or sincere values on humanity or international law. So I ask everybody to turn to their conscience and to look at the facts. Look at the massacres that the Azeri people, Azerbaijani Turks, had gone through under Hocalı and all the other, despicable acts committed by Armenian forces. So these should be condemned clearly, and we all have a responsibility to find a fair and just solution to this conflict. We are not taking sides. We need to be on the right side. We need to be with our real values. As parliamentarians, we are not the voices of certain lobbies or power centers. We have to be true to our values and our people. We should not discriminate based on the religion, because wherever there is oppression, we need to be together, we speak with one voice and stop this aggression. This should be our mission as parliamentarians. So I believe that, to conclude, NATO Parliamentary Assembly has a mission here. First of all, we need to determine the facts on the ground, and we should not speak with disinformation or propaganda purposes. I'm not getting into all those incorrect assessments by some of our colleagues. Everybody knows that Turkey has acted within international law. In cases of aggression, Turkey defended its territories based on the understanding of self-defense. There hasn't been a genocide committed by Turkey. There has been atrocities against our civilian population during the First World War. And then Turkey had made a decision to basically send the Armenians to a safer area so that they cannot be caught inside these conflicts. Everybody has lost lives. Turkish people, Muslims, Armenians, others, Christians had lost lives, and we share this as a common sorrow for all of us. But blaming Turkey with genocide is the most blatant lie that can be spoken of. I would like to thank you, and I hope we can get a better understanding of the facts through these meetings. Thank you.
Berat, thank you very much. And now to conclude, I will ask the Armenian head of delegation to say some words, and at the end of the meeting, I will give back the floor to the experts to make some or say some comments. And of course, after the Armenian head of delegation, then I will ask Mr. Asgarov, the Azerbaijani head of delegation, to tell the closing remarks over their sides. So now, Mr. Kocharian, if you can, please share your closing remarks with us. If we can put you on screen.
So, Mr. Kochar, yeah, we need to request the floor. We don't have you on the list yet, Mr. Kocharian. So if you would like to request the floor to speak, you need to click on that button at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So I don't see him, Mr. Oh, I saw him briefly and then he disappeared again. Mr. Kocharian, if you can ask the floor again.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. The floor is yours, Andranik.
Я на русском хочу ответить, потому что мой коллега...
My colleague has covered a number of issues. We are discussing these issues. And I think you know that there's active hostilities across the front line, and the Azerbaijani army is bombing the villages. Again, they were bombing Stepanakert today. We need to abide by the Moscow talks decisions about the ceasefire. 100 they used a plane. Yesterday they used precision missiles in the Armenian territory. And they also decided to talk about peace by going to war every day from morning till night. And they are not just bombing the civilians, but they are already moving towards the actual Armenian borders, and this is of great concern. We cannot help but respond. And our colleague was talking about the bombing of Ganja, but he's forgetting how many precise missiles have struck Stepanakert. The bombs that have been bought by Azerbaijan with the help of the Israeli government. Bombs that 60%, you said, 60% of Azerbaijani weapons, it comes from Israel. And they are being used not only against the cities and towns, they were bombing churches. And it is said that Aliyev said that they were not bombing. He doesn't know who was bombing. Yesterday, or the day before yesterday, he said that the Armenians themselves were bombing their own churches in Shusha, which is absurd, of course. This has to stop. We need to get together behind a negotiation table, or around the table, and we need to make sure that the negotiations begin, and we need to look at the whole range of these suggestions. And it is very important that we look at self-determination. Self-determination is an important instrument that needs to be used today. I think that tomorrow we will also have Azerbaijani army bombing military facilities, but also Stepanakert, and as well as other cities and towns in Nagorno-Karabakh. There is no point for Armenia to go to war. We did not start the offensive. It was the Azerbaijani army. In 2016 was a local war, but 2 years later, all of the military power that they have been accumulating over the previous decades is now being used. This is a fifth-generation war. They have precise missiles in their arsenal and artillery that will not leave a chance for even for the civilians to defend themselves. What are we to do? So we need NATO to use its own leverage to make sure that Turkey does not intervene in this military conflict. It gives Azerbaijan an opportunity. And Turkey's involvement in this conflict will only exacerbate the situation. We need to initiate the peace process. As soon as tomorrow, we can initiate this process. But the military conflict needs to be stopped right now. I don't know why, but the Azerbaijani side does not want the Red Cross to intervene right now. And all of the bodies that are lining the streets in these neutral areas, they need to be collected and buried. This is really unfathomable. Really unfathomable, because there are so many bodies on both sides. Every day, we provide information about our losses, precise information every day. Why does not Azerbaijan provide this information about their losses? Why do they agree? Why don't they agree to having a chance for a ceasefire for 1 day or 2 days, at least to collect their bodies and have them buried? According to Muslim rules, bodies have to be buried within 2 days. But these are issues that give us an opportunity to look at who started the war and how we can resolve the Nagorno-Karabakh issue. There's no military solution to this. Armenians have been living for centuries in this territory, and they will continue to live in these territories. And until we have the very last Armenian person, they will fight for their families, for their land, for peace on this land. For centuries, this is what they did, and they always wanted. They always wanted to remove the indigenous population from there. It's not possible. Just do not pursue this. There is no military solution. We will defend the people of this land until the very last. Thank you.
The floor to Ziafat Asgarov, the head of the Azerbaijani delegation. Mr. Asgarov, Ziafat, the floor is yours, please.
We don't hear.
Меня слышно? Okay.
Thank you. Esteemed colleagues, in conclusion, I wanted to say a few words. Let us call a spade a spade. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all of you very closely, and none of you, except for the Turkish delegate, has mentioned the actual root cause of this conflict. What do we want? We only want one thing. Move your forces out of our historical, traditional lands. And then the issue is resolved. It's over. Now, my colleagues have raised a number of issues. With regards to the status quo, for 30 years we have been saying to Armenia and to the international organizations, to the UN, to the OSCE, we asked them, we implored them, let us remove the status quo. The status quo is no longer acceptable. They agreed, and then they went back home and they forgot all about it. What should we do? We started with the Armenian provocation, and this is why we started liberating our lands. Unfortunately, Armenia and the Armenian political and military leadership are not able to fight like men on the battlefield. They attack civilians. They kill civilians. They perpetrate genocide. They kill children, elders, women. Do you understand what is going on? And then they move, they shift, they move these terrorists from Lebanon and Syria, etc., etc. And then they call upon us to find a peaceful resolution. We are in favor of peace. For 30 years, we asked them to live in peace. Nobody was listening. Where were you then? And all of a sudden, all of you have remembered about some kind of peace. Suddenly, you remembered about the prowess of the Azerbaijani army. Why were you silent about this before? Where were you before? One of the Italian delegates. By the way, Italy is a member of the Minsk group. And I would like to ask this Italian member of parliament, where were you in the last 30 years that you were a member of the Minsk group? Not a single time you raised the issue in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly that our Azerbaijani territory have been occupied. Distinguished Armenian colleagues, can you leave the Azerbaijani territories? No, everyone was silent. Another esteemed colleague, actually an expert, I think he said that Armenia and Azerbaijan need to sort it out between themselves. Yes, we are sorting it out for 30 years, and we wanted to sort it out peacefully. But maybe somebody still thinks that this conflict can be resolved by peaceful means. I'm afraid you are deeply wrong. This conflict can be resolved militarily. That's it. Because for 30 years, the last 30 years has proved that peace does not resolve this. Unfortunately, my great-grandfather was born in Nagorno-Karabakh. My great-grandfather built Shusha, where you had some kind of festivities with your president or the prime minister, his inauguration, he was dancing there. You were keeping cattle in our mosques. You were insulting our religious feelings, Muslim feelings, and the feelings of the Muslims of the whole world. And now you are saying that Armenia is a Christian country. Of course, we respect very much the religious feelings of any human being. In Azerbaijan, we have numerous religious denominations, Catholics, Orthodox, Jews, Orthodox Christians. 30,000 Armenians live in Baku. We've renovated the Armenian church in Baku. And now you're saying that somewhere in Shusha or Stepanakert we destroyed an Armenian church. That's a lie. That's a barefaced lie and a provocation, and you have to be able to prove it. I'm wrapping up. Somebody from the European Union also spoke, and they said they called upon Azerbaijan. But colleagues, all of the members of the European Union have already initialed an agreement which says clearly that the European Union respects the territorial integrity, sovereignty of national borders. Why are you not referring to these resolutions that were adopted by the UN Security Council? Why? We are experts, we are members of parliament, we need to be referring to specific figures and legal norms. You have forgotten about the resolutions, and you're saying that you're saying this. Every day Armenians are bombarding our cities and towns. I just now have received information about this. And my impression is that those who have been there, I'm wrapping up. With regards to Turkey, I'm wrapping up. Once again, I will say that Turkey supports us by political and diplomatic means. That's it. Just so you know. By the way, Turkey supports international law because Turkey is a member of the Minsk OSCE group. Please support the international law. Support fairness. With regards to self-determination, esteemed Mr. Kochiran, you have already self-determined once. You have your Armenian state. You can't have a second Armenian state on Azerbaijani land. That's it. Some European countries were calling upon us to guarantee self-determination. Why wasn't Spain giving us that? Why Corsica in France were not given self-determination? Allow them self-determination. Show us an example of your European democracy. Why not? Once again, my impression is that that you've hired some people to speak in favor of Armenians.
Or to Lawrence and Nona to conclude and close the today session because we are run out of time. So the floor is yours, please, Lawrence.
To be honest, I have nothing to add, so I leave the floor to Lawrence maybe to conclude it.
Okay, let's try. Yes, Lawrence, please.
Okay, I'd like to thank all those who spoke and shared their perspectives. I'll just finish with just a few points. We've heard about each side being the aggressor in this conflict. The consensus in the expert community is that this was an Azerbaijani offensive, militarily speaking, but politically, of course, it's much more complex. I think the real point is that both sides in this conflict have relied on the use of force to advance their political agendas, whether that's through destabilizing the ceasefire or occupying large swathes of territory in order to gain political concessions. I agree with Mr. Asgarov that the situation that has endured through all these years has been unacceptable. A military victory in 1994 did not solve the conflict, and that's why we are where we are today. So, that's why peace-building practitioners such as myself have been trying to attract attention to this conflict, arguing that it is not a frozen conflict, that we need to do something, and that international attention needs to be focused on the situation. With regard to responsibility and attribution, if we're going to condemn some bombs and some attacks, we have to condemn all of them. So I agree in that sense with Mr. Kocharyan. If we're going to talk and condemn about the attack in Ganja, we have to do the same for strikes on Stepanakert. Or it's all or nothing. We have to focus on and condemn all attacks on civilians, not just some of them. So I'll finish just by saying that, by reiterating that we need a new security architecture to address this conflict, and we need a new political process with serious momentum, with sustained international commitment to take it forward. Otherwise, we could simply be here in another 5 years discussing another escalation of violence between Armenians and Azerbaijanis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all to engage in this today's session, which was very informative and very interesting. And of course, I would like to thank the interpreters today, because it was a quite long session, and of course for our presenters and all those colleagues who posed a question or told their opinion about this conflict. And of course, we are ready to engage in this dialogue again, time by time, if it's necessary, so we can continue this kind of dialogue and conversation about this conflict, just to be able to understand better each other's position. So thank you very much again for your time and your presence for all of you, and I would like to close today's webinar. Thank you very much again. Thanks.